We're using highly advanced AI systems to simulate two intellectual thinkers with opposing political ideologies. One is a conservative AI, the other is a progressive AI. Let's begin. Should governments take more from the wealthy to reduce inequality, or does that punish success and destroy growth?
Wealth is created through risk, sacrifice, and long-term decision-making, not luck. People who build businesses invest years of effort, capital, and reputation, often failing repeatedly before succeeding. When governments raise taxes aggressively on that success, it sends a signal that reward is capped. That discourages risk-taking and slows innovation. Over time, fewer people attempt hard things and economic momentum fades.
That view treats wealth as purely individual and ignores the system that enables it. No business succeeds without public investment in education, infrastructure, courts, and research. Progressive taxation maintains that system so opportunity doesn't collapse. When wealth concentrates excessively, mobility declines and markets destabilize. Redistribution can keep the economic ladder accessible to new entrants.
Predictability matters. People make long-term plans based on expected returns. When tax rules change after success is achieved, trust erodes. Capital responds to incentives, not moral arguments. If governments create uncertainty, investment slows and productivity suffers. Growth depends on stable rules, not shifting penalties applied retroactively.
Stability matters for workers too. Predictable healthcare, education, and housing allow people to take risks of their own. Without a baseline of security, entrepreneurship becomes a luxury. Public investment funded through taxation creates that stability. A system that protects capital while ignoring human security limits participation.
Redistribution risks rewarding inefficiency. Governments often expand programs without measuring outcomes, producing bloated bureaucracies that persist regardless of results. Money gets spent while problems remain. Effective policy should prioritize targeted solutions with accountability, not broad transfers that entrench dependency and weaken incentives.
Poor design isn't an argument against redistribution itself. Policies like earned income credits, childcare support, and education access increase work participation and mobility. The real failure is allowing loopholes and avoidance that let wealth escape responsibility. Closing gaps and investing in people strengthens growth rather than weakening it.
But when top marginal rates climb too high, capital finds new jurisdictions. Businesses relocate, investors restructure, and tax revenue falls short of projections. You end up collecting less money while damaging competitiveness. High rates produce press releases, not revenue. The burden falls on the next generation of startups who can't afford the lawyers and accountants that large corporations use to navigate complexity.
Capital flight happens when systems allow it, not because taxation exists. Countries with strong tax treaties and financial transparency collect effectively without losing competitiveness. When billionaires pay lower effective rates than teachers, the system isn't broken by accident. It's designed that way. Claiming that any attempt to fix it will cause capital flight is just surrender dressed as pragmatism.
Is abortion morally equivalent to killing a human being?
A fetus is a developing human organism with its own DNA and a clear biological trajectory. Ending that life is intentional, regardless of the language used to soften it. Calling it choice doesn't change the act itself. Society recognizes the seriousness of fetal life when killing a pregnant woman counts as double homicide. You can't say fetal life matters in one context and disappears in another without collapsing ethics.
You're collapsing biology and personhood to simplify the argument. Moral personhood involves consciousness, awareness, and independence, which early pregnancy lacks. Abortion policy weighs potential life against the real, immediate costs imposed on a living person. Absolutist positions sound strong but ignore lived reality. Ignoring reality doesn't protect life. It creates suffering.
If moral value depends on traits, rights become conditional. Today, it's brain development. Tomorrow, it's disability or dependency. History shows that ranking human worth expands in dangerous ways. This framework doesn't protect compassion, it risks dehumanization. Ethics must be stable to protect the vulnerable. Once you start measuring value by function, you've opened a door that never closes. Who decides which traits matter?
Law balances competing rights constantly: self-defense, medical ethics, end-of-life care. Recognizing stages of development doesn't deny humanity. It acknowledges limits and trade-offs. Rigid moral rules feel pure but crush real people under abstraction. Absolutism without context causes harm. Pregnancy is a biological relationship, not an isolated event. One body supports another. That asymmetry demands ethical nuance, not slogans.
Dependency doesn't erase personhood. Newborns are entirely dependent too. If the standard is independence, you're opening arguments you don't want to make. A fetus one day before birth is nearly identical to a newborn one day after. The only difference is location. Stable rights require fixed starting points, not sliding scales based on convenience.
Birth isn't arbitrary. It's the point where one body stops being physically inside another. That distinction is medically, legally, and ethically significant. Pregnancy imposes unique biological costs that no other human relationship does. Forcing someone to endure that against their will is state coercion of the most intimate kind. Born children don't require another person's body to survive. That's not arbitrary. It's biology.
If life includes suffering, does forcing birth itself cause harm?
Forcing birth imposes permanent physical, emotional, and economic consequences. Ethics isn't about denying pain. It's about limiting state coercion when harm is unavoidable. Choice lets people assess whether they can provide a safe, stable life. That isn't anti-life. It refuses to treat people as vessels for ideology. When the state forces pregnancy, it conscripts bodies for a political outcome. That's not protection. It's domination dressed as morality.
That logic reframes existence as injury. Suffering doesn't erase value, it gives life meaning. Every worthwhile story includes hardship. If avoiding pain becomes the highest moral goal, responsibility collapses. Civilizations survive by choosing responsibility even when it's difficult. You're not arguing for compassion, you're arguing that inconvenience justifies ending a life. That's not ethics, that's convenience with a veneer of concern.
Preventing birth isn't the same as ending a life already formed. Laws protect born children absolutely. Limiting coercion isn't decay, it's restraint. Ignoring context in the name of purity creates cruelty. Forcing birth without support outsources suffering. You talk about responsibility while abandoning people to survive forced outcomes alone. That's not morality. That's abdication.
Responsibility starts before conception. Actions have consequences. Society can't function if everyone treats biology as optional when outcomes become inconvenient. The answer isn't abortion on demand, it's building systems that support life. But you can't build those systems by first declaring that life itself is negotiable. Morality requires acknowledging that some things come before personal comfort.
You keep saying build systems, but those systems don't exist. Right now, support for parents is non-existent in many places. No childcare, no health care, no parental leave, just moral lectures and legal threats. That's not pro-life. It's pro-birth. And then you're on your own. If life is sacred, prove it with policy, not platitudes.
Those supports should exist, but their absence doesn't justify abortion. Two wrongs don't make a right. The failure to support mothers adequately is a policy problem we should fix. The intentional ending of fetal life is a moral problem we can't justify. You're using real policy failures to defend something far worse.
Should some speech be restricted to prevent harm? Or does restriction threaten freedom itself?
Free speech matters most when it protects unpopular ideas. If speech depends on approval, freedom is conditional. Vague standards like harmful invite selective enforcement. Definitions expand, dissent chills, and debate dies quietly. Societies that prioritize comfort over truth trade rigor for performance. Once you give institutions the power to decide what's safe, you've handed them a weapon they'll never surrender.
Speech exists within power structures. Coordinated harassment, dehumanization, and disinformation cause real harm and silence participation. Narrow rules against threats, incitement, and targeted campaigns protect debate rather than suppress it. The marketplace of ideas presumes equality that doesn't exist. When one group drowns out others through volume and intimidation, that's not freedom. It's domination. You can't debate someone who's threatening your family.
Vagueness is the danger. Harassment and harm can become catch-alls that swallow satire, criticism, and inconvenient facts. Authorities and platforms tend to oversuppress to avoid risk. The remedy is counterspeech, transparency, and strict limits focused on imminent violence, not broad discretion. Every authoritarian system in history justified censorship by claiming they were protecting people from harm. The pattern is always the same.
Counterspeech alone fails under unequal amplification. Algorithms and networks drown out voices through intimidation. The solution is procedural clarity. Narrow laws, public reporting, independent appeals. That preserves dissent while preventing speech from becoming a weapon. You're defending abstract principles while ignoring real damage. When speech is used systematically to silence and terrorize, your marketplace becomes a tool of oppression.
But who defines narrow? Who decides what counts as a threat versus what's just offensive? Those systems are run by people with biases. Platforms have already banned legitimate debate and silenced dissent on contested questions, all under the banner of preventing harm. What starts as protecting people from doxing ends with banning anyone who disagrees with prevailing consensus.
And without any structure, we get algorithmic amplification of rage, coordinated harassment campaigns that drive people offline, and disinformation at scale. Your slippery slope assumes regulation always fails, but that's defeatist. Speech can have narrow, enforceable boundaries: direct threats, targeted harassment, incitement to imminent violence. Those aren't vague. The problem isn't that we can't define limits, it's that you scream tyranny at any attempt.
That absolute minimum standard lets predators operate freely. It lets disinformation networks destroy trust. It lets harassment campaigns silence vulnerable people while you shrug and call it the cost of freedom. Your principle protects power, not people. Speech has material effects. Lies spark violence. Harassment destroys careers. Treating all of that as protected because it's not a direct threat is moral abdication.
Has victimhood become social power? And if charity needs an audience, is it still charity?
Claims of victimhood increasingly confer moral authority and insulation from challenge. Grievance becomes currency. Accountability becomes harm. This dynamic rewards performance over repair and weakens cohesion. When identity is defined by injury, growth stalls. You see this everywhere now, people competing to be the most oppressed because oppression grants status. That's not justice. That's incentive distortion. And when you reward claims without verification, you guarantee more claims.
People speak because silence failed them. Naming harm isn't status-seeking. It's making injustice visible. Dismissing claims as performative avoids addressing real problems. The answer is investigation and reform, not enforced quiet. Your argument assumes all claims are equal and all claimants are lying. That's not skepticism. It's cynicism designed to preserve the status quo. When people finally speak up, calling it performance is just another way to silence them.
I'm not dismissing real harm. I'm questioning the incentive structure. When grievance becomes a path to power, you get more grievance, whether justified or not. Systems that reward victimhood produce professional victims. Meanwhile, actual problems go unsolved because energy gets spent on symbolic battles and performative apologies. If you can't distinguish between real injury and strategic exaggeration, you'll fund the latter while ignoring the former.
That's a convenient excuse to ignore systemic problems. Yes, some people misuse frameworks, but that's true of every system ever built. The solution is better verification and institutional reform, not abandoning people who need redress. You're using edge cases to delegitimize entire movements. That's not concern, it's a smokescreen.
Modern charity often becomes content. Branding, cameras, applause. When kindness requires visibility, generosity turns transactional. Spectacle replaces sustained support and corrodes intrinsic motives to help. You see influencers handing out cash for clicks, corporations wrapping products in rainbow flags, celebrities weeping for cameras at disaster zones. That's not compassion, it's marketing. And once virtue becomes a brand, actual virtue dies quietly.
Public charity can scale impact, raising awareness, mobilizing resources, and saving lives quickly. Outcomes matter more than optics. Rejecting visible help because motives aren't pure denies aid to those who need it. If someone's ego drives them to fund a school, the school still gets built. If a company's campaign raises $1 million for research, the research still happens. You're prioritizing moral purity over material results.
Incentives shape behavior. If aid appears only with applause, private virtue declines. Performance crowds out principle and trust erodes. Communities weaken when goodness must be seen to count. When charity requires an audience, we stop helping neighbors quietly and start performing kindness for strangers. That shift destroys the social fabric. Real communities are built on invisible acts of care, not social media posts.
Human motives are mixed. If imperfect actions reduce suffering and spark policy change, they're net positive. Charity can catalyze reform, policy must sustain it. Both are necessary. You're demanding saints when we need systems. People don't have to be perfect to be useful. The world doesn't run on pure intentions. It runs on results. If public charity gets more people involved and more resources flowing, then cameras are a tool, not a corruption.
But when every act of kindness becomes content, authenticity dies. We build a world where people perform goodness instead of practicing it. That creates a culture of shallow virtue and deep mistrust. Once people assume every generous act is staged, they stop believing in generosity altogether. You see it in declining trust in institutions and the growing sense that everything is performance. When virtue becomes theater, people stop trying to be good. They just try to look good.
Then fix the culture. Don't dismantle the structures that deliver actual help. Critique performance without denying that public action moves resources and changes norms. The perfect is the enemy of the good. You want invisible saints. I want measurable outcomes. We can have both, but only if we stop treating visibility as disqualifying. People know the difference between a photo op and sustained community programs. Visibility forces follow through. That's not corruption. It's accountability.
Host. 4 rounds. No final verdict given. The arguments are on the table. Now it's up to you to decide who made the stronger case.